Hi, and welcome to our session on stepping up your protection with intelligent security. My name is Adam Baer, and I look after product marketing here at Microsoft for our EMS and security products. So today I'm going to talk to you about our holistic security process and our security products across Microsoft. So I want to start and sort of just help understand the situation and understand kind of where all of you are at as our customers. When we think about security, there's more and more threats, more and more press around the kinds of intrusions and kind of attacks that you're under. You know, we do analysis every year with our security intelligence report, and we find some really interesting statistics that I wanted to share with you. We see that identity continues to be one of the most profitable ways to attack customers by hackers. We see a 300% increase in user-based or user account-based attacks this year. So that continues to be a really important factor for people who are trying to attack our customers. We also are finding that, now 96%, the vast majority of malware is now what we've called automated in its polymorphic processes. That means that every time we see that piece of malware, it's slightly different. So keeping up with that is really difficult to do. And we find that the cost or the impacts of these breaches are really significant. Research will show us that just the cost of recovery can be in the tens of millions of dollars, not to mention the hit that you might take or your company might take on its reputation or market size, right? Like if the stock price goes down. So all of these things really contribute to this new world of security threats that are really difficult to keep track of and require a very sophisticated set of tools to help keep up with. And how have we sort of gotten to this point? And what kind of additional problems have we created when we think about moving from the world of old school IT to what we've got today? In the past, the IT environment has been something that's controlled, locked down, inside of a building, connected to a network. And as we think about, the changes that you have faced within your companies, you have new opportunities, right? You need to be able to take on mobile devices. You need to be able to work with partners. You need to be able to work with other kinds of people that don't work inside of your buildings, right? You've got things that are on premises. You've got other supply chain elements. You've got, other customers or citizens or end users that you need to be able to protect. So no longer can you control the data, keep it inside of your boundary. It's a distributed network of elements. And over time, the attackers have found new threat vectors across this new distributed set of data and capabilities and endpoints. And so now, being able to attack one of those things, attackers or hackers can make their way in, spread laterally, and then find data across your network, and then steal it, exfiltrate it, hold you for ransom, etc. So we've got a whole new world moving from this concept of kind of having a controlled network to having this distributed set of endpoints, devices, and data that have different attack vectors that you need to plan for. So how do we think about Microsoft being able to help in this world? We really have three elements that we bring together across the company. The first one is intelligence. And so we think about being able to apply intelligent signal with machine learning and advanced intelligence to understand and spot threats before they become large problems, and then give that data back to our customers so that they can protect themselves. We think about partners. So, Microsoft has a lot of resources and lots of technology, but we have to work together. No one company is going to be able to solve these problems themselves. No one government agency can protect everyone. So being able to partner together is really an important part of the strategy. And then lastly, we build technology. That's what Microsoft does. We have platforms across email and Azure and the web and with Windows. So building that security capability from the platform perspective is an important part, that third pillar of our Microsoft's unique approach to delivering these advanced security capabilities to you, our customers. So let's just drill into that for a second. What does it mean? How do we think about intelligence? And what does that bring to the security conversation and the security capabilities? When we really think about being able to make a dent in the security attacks is being able to leverage the gigantic amounts of signal to understand when attacks are happening, how they're changing, where they're showing up, and move against that in near real-time kind of scenarios. So being able to process the depth of that signal is a huge advantage that Microsoft has. When you think about being able to understand the breadth of what's happening in Windows 10, what's happening at the device level, across the hundreds and hundreds of millions of Windows devices that report telemetry back as to what's happening, that's a huge source of data. And we think about the web pages that get scanned and crawled by Bing every day. Where are those botnets? Where are those bad IP addresses? Feeding that all into our system. Being able to understand who's logging into what application, whether that's Office 365 or our enterprise services, or even our consumer services like Outlook.com or Xbox Live. Being able to put that together, leverage that data in automated ways is an important differentiator for Microsoft. This is data that our individual customers don't have because they might have information just on their environment. Some of our competitors might have that just on one piece of that puzzle, but Microsoft brings the breadth of that together in what we call our intelligent security graph. So bringing that together, looking at that data and that unique data that Microsoft brings, like I talked about, the user authentications. Every month, Microsoft processes over 450 billion user authentications across our enterprise and our commercial services. We have over 1 billion Windows devices that are updated every month. And so we can understand what's the status of those devices, what's being attacked, what kind of things are happening. And again, not to mention the emails, right? Over 400 billion emails that we've scanned and analyzed to understand spam, malware, phishing attacks. So we take all of that data and in a unique way, bring that together across our machine learning and artificial intelligence to spot these threats and to give that data back to our customers to help keep them more secure. Now, as we augment that machine learning and the raw data that we have, we also have human intelligence that fits into that puzzle. We have over 3,000 security professionals that work at Microsoft that keep our systems up and running and that look for problems every day. Those are all about kind of what we call our red and blue team. So these two hunter and defender teams that look for vulnerabilities and that try to keep those people out that simulate attacks every single day. We also work with what we call our cyber defense team, our CDOC, to be able to work with law enforcement to understand botnets or bad malicious actors and use law enforcement and partner with law enforcement to bring some of those things down. So again, being able to bring together the people intelligence with our automated machine intelligence makes Microsoft really unique in the space when we think about the data and how we work to make this ecosystem much more secure. Now, so that's intelligence. Let's talk about our partner process and how we think about partnerships in this approach to help keep things, our customers more secure. And that's really across three things. We work with other vendors in the space, right? Think about other security partners. We work together to help share information and understand natures of attack. Our professionals work with their professionals to make sure that we're partnering with peer organizations. We also work with industry alliances. You think about those groups that build standard processes or write standards to keep customers and keep software secure. Microsoft partners with those industry alliances. And then as I alluded to earlier with our people intelligence, we work with governments, law enforcement, to make sure that we understand and feed information back and forth appropriately to target that criminal behavior to ensure that we're keeping our customers more secure. So that's kind of how we think about intelligence and then partners and how we partner with others. And then lastly, this is kind of really the bulk of the rest of the conversation. We're going to take you through kind of our platform. And the first element here is this foundation that we think about from a security perspective on the platform. One that's about kind of how we build the software, how we run our data centers. Think about physical security, right? Making sure that we have the minimum amount of access to the minimum number of people to that data so that we can keep it safe and have a limited number of vectors in. You think about even applying things like just-in-time admin or just enough admin, where we elevate permissions and then remove them to ensure that only the right people have access to the right data. That kind of talks about that operational security. And then we think about those global data centers, right? We have massive investments around the data centers to keep them safe when we think about physical security, the ops security, and how that data transitions inside of those data centers. So we think about that foundational element that spreads across the variety of Microsoft products as a super important piece of the puzzle. And then we think about the products that we build the security technology into. And I think about those in 4 buckets. The first one is around identity and access management. We have to be able to understand, who is getting access to what. We have those tools with Azure Active Directory within Windows that we enable all that capability. Then we think about protecting the data. So there's information protection. How do we, once we know who that person is and we've let them in, how do we make sure that that data stays where it's supposed to, that we can reason over it, encrypt it where necessary, whether we're sharing that inside our organization or outside our organization. Then we have to be able to understand, we understand who they are, how we deal with the data, but you have to be able to protect against threats. And in some cases, assume breach. Even though we're going to do the best job at protecting the access, people will make it in, given enough time and enough resources. So being able to understand those threats and reduce the amount of time from when you identify the threats to when the threat actors actually made it into your environment. So you can reduce that amount of time is a key part of the strategy. And then being able to manage, apply policies in ways that help IT be more efficient. Those are really the 4 pillars of how we talk about our built-in security to our Microsoft products. And just to drill into those a little bit more, here's how we think about those pillars and how the tons of products and the capabilities that we have that show up across these. Across Microsoft 365, Azure, Dynamics, across the broad portfolio of Microsoft capabilities. And so I'm going to spend the rest of the time today talking you through some demos of where this comes to life to sort of show you how the technology actually delivers against these security capabilities. Let's start with identity and access management. When we think about the old world, back to that category, that idea of the network is all siloed off and protected, it's separate, it's inside my boundaries. We think about being able to introduce mobile devices, personal devices, cloud applications, business partners, customers. This has stretched and expanded the capability, the ability of your on-prem network and identity to function, right? Those things just break the process. So we think about moving to the future, we really see this cloud-based identity as this new control plane for our security policies and for that identity story. We really think about identity as kind of the last control plane, the last place where you're going to be able to ensure that you have a holistic security approach across all of those capabilities, not only your on-prem and private cloud, but the mobile devices that don't come into your network, the cloud applications that you don't have control over, like Salesforce or Workday or even Office 365. And then we think about even be able to extend those to your business partners, consultants, or people that work for you. And your customers. You want to be able to have a secure way to deal with, to have your customers work with you, whether you're retail or banking or things like that. So we think about Azure Active Directory as the center point of that new control plane for security. And really the killer application and the killer scenario here is what we call conditional access. So this is the ability to ensure that we understand who's coming in, who's requesting access, what conditions they are requesting that access, who they are, what device they're coming from, what the state of that device is, where in the world they might be coming from, what app they're trying to get access from, and then being able to real-time evaluate every single one of those authentication requests to determine, based on all that intelligence we talked about, the intelligent security graph with the billions of data points, how risky this access request actually is. Is it high, medium, or low? And then based on all of that data, we can then apply some controls. If everything looks good, low risk, we know the user, they're coming from a trusted device and in a trusted location, we'll allow them access. But if we see some level of risk, maybe they're coming from a location I don't recognize, or a device I don't recognize, or they're trying to access an application that's a high security application, I might prompt them for a multi-factor authentication, right? I'm going to call them on their phone to make sure they are who they are. Or if I see that the situation is just super risky, it's coming from a known bad IP address where a botnet might be operating from, I could just deny the access altogether. And as we continue to extend this story, we think about protecting on the access, so who you are, blocking or requiring MFA. Now we can apply protection inside sessions. So as people are operating inside those cloud applications or those apps, I can take action inside the app. So if I see them downloading a document that's not appropriate, I can block that access. And again, we can do that for on-prem applications or the thousands of cloud applications that we're connected with. So with that, I want to just flip over to the device here and show you how that works kind of in real time and bring this to life. So now let's take a look at what conditional access looks like in real life. So let's start with our device. So this is my Surface Pro device. It's equipped with Windows Hello, which is a multi-factor authentication capability. It requires something I know, my password, and something I have, my face. and I almost never leave home without my face. So I'm going to turn this device over here. It's going to recognize me. It's going to see who I am, and then it's going to log me in. Just as easy as that. All right, so now that I have access to my device, I've used Windows Hello, I can see here all the applications that my IT department has given me access to. And IT with conditional access can apply different policies to different applications as necessary. So here I'm just going to go try to log into salesforce.com, and it's going to take me into the login experience. And it's, again, going to single sign on using the same corporate credentials. And as you can see here, it's going to prompt me for a multi-factor authentication. Now it's going to pop up on my phone. I'm going to just use as simple as my thumbprint. I'm going to approve the request here on my phone. And as you can see here, it will then log me directly into Salesforce. Now, as we also talked about, Salesforce, in this case, we're going to protect in session as well. So I get a little notification here that says, hey, IT is monitoring access to Salesforce. And so we're going to make sure that only the right kinds of actions inside the Cloud App can be taken as well. So as I finish that login and end up in salesforce.com, you can see all that capability. And so now that I'm in Salesforce, here you can see I can see all the files that I might have. And so I can take action to protect these files that could say, don't download any of these. I'm not going to allow download of these files. So as I try to download the file, it's going to block that and protect it inside the session. So I've gotten a multi-factor authentication when I've logged into the application. I've then been protected inside the application to ensure that I'm only taking the right kinds of actions. So this is a really powerful part of conditional access. And as you can see, it really doesn't get in the way of my productivity as an end user. So let's take a look at what that looks like for an IT pro. How would I set this policy up and take a look at some of the power there? So here we are in our IT Pro console, right? This is the Azure portal. And you can see here that I've bound in a place where I'm creating a new conditional access policy. You can see here that I have a variety of assignments. I can target apps or users. I can select the kind of conditions. So I'll just drill in here for a second. And here you can see really those 4 areas we talked about. I can configure this based on risk. And so based on that intelligent security graph, do I want to prompt things or block access based on high, medium, low, or no risk? I can set up all of these conditions. I can determine what kind of device that I want it to be. I can ensure that the device is up to date or enrolled in Intune or have some kind of policy set against it before I give access to it. So I can do that all within here. I can also determine based on location or IP address who I want to let in or not. And then once I've created all those conditions, then I apply the policies. So I can do that across a couple of different ways. I can grant access, and then require a multi-factor authentication in some cases, or I can actually do the session control as well to say inside the session, I want to provide additional levels of capability or protection and set that all up here. So a super powerful experience for IT pros monitoring and setting all of the conditional access approach all from one console, bringing together Azure Active Directory, Intune, Microsoft Cloud App Security. So a really powerful experience to help keep IT pros productive while they're doing all of the security capabilities that they need to keep this stuff protected. All right, so that was a great view of kind of all the identity and access management, really with a highlight on those conditional access capabilities that are new and unique. So now that was about protecting at the front door. Once you, let me just start this one again real quick. So that was all the conditional access capabilities that we show you, which are a critical part of that identity and access management story. That's all about protecting at the front door, understanding who is trying to get access to what, and making sure that we can reason against that. Once you've let a user or device inside of your protection, if you will, then you have to be able to protect that information. You have to make sure that documents, emails, files only are accessed by the right kind of authorized people. And that really is across a full life cycle. This is an important part of what we think about as information protection. So I have to be able to identify that sensitive data and protect it throughout its life cycle, both inside my organization as people who inside your company might interact with it, but as well as if it leaves your organization. Maybe you want to share it with a business partner or send it to your end customers. You want to make sure that only the right people have access to it. So you have to be able to understand and detect what that data is. You have to apply some kind of classification to it that says this is high business impact, or it's secret, or it's confidential. And then in some cases, you want to apply a protection policy. You want to encrypt it, for example. And then you also want to be able to monitor and understand what's happening with that data as it flows through the life cycle and as it's collaborated. So then I'm going to flip back in again. That's all about our information protection story. Let's see how it looks in real life. So I'm going to flip over to this device here, and we will then kind of show you what some of those key information protection capabilities look like. All right, so here we are in Box. So this is my corporate place where I'm storing data in this example. And one of the things that's really important that we want to be able to do across our information protection story is that we have the ability to protect the data inside these applications. So this is being able to protect the information without being intrusive to an end user. So in this case, I want to be able to show you that here's a document. There's no encryption or policy is set to this document, but I'm just going to upload it to Box. So in this case, I'm going to put the document straight into Box. It will be loaded in there. After it's loaded, Microsoft Cloud App Security is actually going to take a look at the files, because we've asked it to do this as a policy, to assess all the files. And in some cases, we're going to ask it to apply an encryption policy inside the cloud application. So that's going to do that. I'll flip back to this in just a second. It takes a minute or two. So that's an important part of working together across those cloud apps. One of the other important scenarios that our customers have is being able to share encrypted email outside their organization. So you want to be able to share this Project Orlando launch plan, in this case, with someone that you're working on. Maybe this is an event that you're working on and it's someone outside your organization that needs to execute against it. You want to share this information, but it's sensitive. It's about maybe a product launch or something that you don't want to get out into the public. So you want to be able to share this document here, Project Orlando launch plan. You're going to share it outside your organization. In this case, I've got a Gmail account here, and I'm just going to click Protect. So now you can see that this email has this protection capabilities assigned to it. I'm going to push Send. And then this will show up in that external email box, and we'll be able to show you how we keep that data safe inside that experience of the external email, of the Gmail in this case. So as I mentioned, I sent that email to my Gmail account. Here I am in my Gmail inbox. I'm just going to open that email. And again, you can see here that this is a note. It's indicated from Office 365. I can click the box that says read the message. And then inside the context, I'm just going to get a really great experience. I don't have to have a Microsoft account. I can continue to just log in with my Google account, and I can see and view both the email and the document that's been attached. So you can have all of this data, again, inside this secure framework to keep the data safe, even if you're extending your information you want to share outside your organization with Gmail or Yahoo or other consumer email accounts. All right, so let's flip back to that Box screen and show you where that document is that we uploaded just a second ago. So here I am back at Box. I've got my document that I uploaded just a couple of minutes ago, this Project Orlando launch plan. So I'm going to download this document. And as it does that, when we uploaded it, you saw that we didn't include any protection, any encryption policies. And so as I open the document, it's going to open up in Word here. And you can see that as I open it, it will have inherited an encryption policy, a protection policy. And you can see here that I've restricted the access to this document. Again, this is Microsoft 365 with Cloud App Security intercepting that document inside another cloud application, applying encryption policies to it so that the document is safe. And we can ensure that no matter who opens it, if it's downloaded out of these cloud applications, it's still protected and it's still safe. So this is a really important scenarios that our customers have. Sharing email, putting documents inside of applications. And you can see here that there was a very minimal interruption to an end user, right? An end user didn't have to do anything for this document in Box for it to just show up as protected. It's all automated behind the scenes within Microsoft 365. All right, so we've taken you through that identity story and the protecting at the front door. We've taken you through kind of some of those scenarios with information protection and that holistic approach that we take to make sure that documents and emails and files are only seen by the right people. When we think about, protecting at the front door, protecting against the data, you also have to think about, threat protection as a key part of the story. You have to be able to protect against those advanced threats. You have to be able to recover quickly, which is all about reducing the amount of time from an attack that's penetrated your environment in some way and you finding it and remediating it. So this is an important part of our Microsoft 365 story across Office, Windows, and Azure Advanced Threat Protection. So let's talk a little bit about kind of this spectrum of attacks and things that you have to think about within the threat protection world. There are things that you have to do pre-breach, and we've talked about a few of those with identity and access management, protecting the data, but you also have to be able to do threat isolation. You have to be able to control execution. Oftentimes, bad actors or attackers will want to inject code that runs, whether that's through an email or directly into Windows. So being able to control that execution, prevent those encounters is an important part of our pre-breach strategy. But like I talked about, you have to assume that there is breaches already happening. And so you have to be able to understand the post-breach behavior, which is I have to be able to understand anomalous behavior, things that are changing. You have to be able to have a baseline and then understand who's doing things that they don't normally do. And then you have to be able to respond and remediate. And this is an important part of the Microsoft 365 story. As you think about the thousands of attacks that happen every day across the world, millions of attacks even, being able to respond and remediate in automated ways is an important part of what you need to think about with your security strategy. Human hands and the amount of time, adding people to a security team will no longer allow you to keep up. You have to think about automation. So now I want to walk you through a demonstration of some of these threat protection capabilities specific to Windows in this case. And so let's start with Windows Defender Application Control. So here I am in my Azure console as my IT pro. I'm inside of Intune in this case, and I'm setting policy around Windows Defender Application Control. So this is helping me to make some intelligent choices around what I want applications to be able to do. I want to make sure that the applications have code integrity checks in place, and so I can make sure that only apps that have those code integrity checks in place are running. And I want to make sure that only trust apps, right, that have the right kind of trust certifications to make sure that only those kind of apps run on my device. So as I flip over to my Windows device now, I can take a look. I have this application here that I've clearly labeled as a bad app. It's untrusted. It has some code that doesn't have the right kind of capabilities in place. And so when I try to actually run that application or open it, Windows Defender is going to intercept that and block the application. So again, I'm making sure that the bad application and that whatever that app is going to try to do is blocked before it can actually take action. So we're doing that automated remediation in the Windows environment. Let's take that next step. What do we think about as ransomware is another really important part of the strategy that our attackers use. And so here's a scenario when we think about ransomware. In this case, there's an email that is opened. It's got a document attached to it. And that document in this email is specifically designed to spoof an actual email from a company. And so the end user is going to open it. They are going to open the document, and that document is going to run some macros in the background that's going to take the data and encrypt it. And so now this lovely gentleman on the left is going to ask me for some Bitcoin to unlock my documents. This is kind of the nightmare scenario for our customers. So here, when we think about Exploit Guard within another capability within Windows Defender, here we are setting it up in our IT Pro policy engine within Intune. And so I can ensure that the applications only run appropriate kinds of code. I can block apps that want to run macros that aren't trusted and things like that. So once I've set that up, all my Windows devices are going to be able to identify these threats, intercept them, and prevent these kind of attacks going forward. So if we replay that scenario with the email, now the email's opened, I'm going to run the document, and it's going to try to run those macros that aren't appropriate. And in this case, Windows is going to intercept it and say, hold on, I have found this document to try to be running some code that's not approved. So Windows Defender is blocking it, right? So now I've prevented this ransomware situation in real time with the device. We also have capabilities coming from Office 365 with SharePoint to be able to roll back. So even if you're on devices that are not Windows 10 and you're impacted by ransomware, we can actually go back and refresh the files that may have been encrypted. Again, more layers of protection across user, device, app, and data. So now that was, a couple of pre-breach kind of scenarios that we talked about. So what I want to talk about now is sort of a post-breach. And we talked about automated remediation, automated response. This is a critical part of a strategy going forward for our customers when we think about securing this modern workplace. And this is Windows Defender Security Center. So we're going to show you some of the automated responses for protecting devices that we've got capabilities around. So here you can see, we have 206 investigations that we completed. We have 189 that we successfully completed. And I think the thing that's really critical here is that the amount of time it took to remediate was 1 minute. And we saved over 164 hours of time of an IT pro, really, because that was what we automated. So this allows people to get to the critical things, to eliminate the false positives, and let a human figure out the things that are the most important or the most critical, and let the machine take care of those automated tasks. So let's drill into kind of what that looks like real quick. So I'm going to open the Security Center dashboard. I'm going to look at some of these attacks that are in process and understand kind of what's happening here. You can see one that's actually running. And so I'm going to open that one up, and kind of by the time we get it open, it probably will be completed. So here we are in kind of a landscape view of what happened, what kind of automated steps were taken, where did the attack come from. So you can see here up at the top, this alert was received via Windows Defender ATP. It spotted this attack. It actually found it via the Windows Defender ATP graph. So this is really that intelligent security that helped identify this threat. So I found the threat. We determined that the type was a Trojan. It was this heuristic kind of malware. It waited for some user approval, and then it remediated automatically, kind of that lower part of the chain. And then there's additional analysis that was provided that you can report on and investigate to help understand what actions it took. You can see here that it analyzed over 3,000 entities, files and users and IP addresses and things like that. And then we were also able to determine that there were other endpoints that were infected with this same piece of malware, with this same issue. And so you can link out and investigate what happened on those endpoints. And then you can also then use the cross scenarios with Office 365 ATP and Azure Advanced Threat Protection, or Azure ATP, to identify maybe this threat came in via email, maybe it came in through a bad identity, and then trace that throughout the system. Again, reducing the amount of time from when you were attacked to when you found it, and how to understand what happened in between those kinds of things. So some really critical capabilities that we think about with Windows Defender and the broader threat protection story with Microsoft 365. The last pillar here I'll talk about for a second is this security management console and idea. So this is the idea of gaining visibility, control over the security tools. There's many security kinds of tools that you have. You think about being able to have fewer of them, make your IT productivity increase. So I'll quickly talk here about kind of the Azure Security Center. So we've talked a lot about EMS and Office and Windows, but this security approach is across all of our Microsoft products and into Azure. When we think about securing our infrastructure, being able to apply that same level of intelligent security to our infrastructure, our IaaS, our VMs, our PaaS roles, to make sure that Azure is as secure as possible, to get intelligent alerts, suggestions of things to kind of go and take action against. So really quickly, I'll just pivot to a couple of customers that have been using Microsoft 365's security capabilities to really help them improve their security posture. The first one is the UK Ministry of Defence. So the UK Ministry of Defence has rolled out Office 365 ATP with Lockbox to help them prevent against these email attacks, also to enable their regulations, like to meet the regulatory compliance needs that they have. Maersk has rolled out Conditional Access with multi-factor authentication to ensure that they're challenging end users before they come into their environment, to make sure that they know who they are and what they're trying to get access to. The U.S. Department of Defense is rolling out Windows 10 at a broad range, and they're also going to use Windows 10 ATP to ensure that they have a higher level of protection and security on those Windows devices. So really some three very large customers, again, using Microsoft 365 and the security capabilities to help improve their security posture. So thanks for checking out our session today. I just want to do a really quick recap. When we think about Microsoft 365 and the security capabilities, there's four elements that we really need that you should think about when you're building out your security posture for your organization. First is like how you give access to the right people with identity and access management tools. Then protecting that data as it flows through your environment with great information protection capabilities. And then you have to assume breach to be able to understand how you reduce the amount of time between when you're attacked and when you find it with great threat protection capabilities. And then managing all of it with the right kinds of tools. So these really are the capabilities in the platform of Microsoft 365 that you can get to ensure that your customer, your company, your data is secure as possible. And again, there's some great actions that you can go take. Today, go out and use Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection to protect against email. We have lots of customers that already own EMS and that have purchased those licenses. To get started with Conditional Access, I can't overestimate how important multi-factor authentication is to just add that layer of protection. So with that, I really want to thank you for checking out this session today and wish you luck with your security strategy in the future.